This episode of Tales from the Lot is sponsored by ShakedownT-shirts.com with unique lot-style t-shirts, license plate frames, coffee mugs, and all sorts of things for Grateful Dead, Fish, Zappa, Panic, and more. ShakedownT-shirts.com, where all U.S. orders over $35 ship free. And just for Tales from the Lot listeners, use the code LOT20 for 20% off of any order. That's LOT20. Tales from the Lot, Truckin Through Time, Part 3. If you're just catching up, we fought our way through the psychedelic trenches of the 60s and basked in the golden light of the early 70s. But today we're hitting the late 70s, 1975 through 1979. To the casual observer, this is just a 5-year stretch in a very long music career. But to a Deadhead, this is the era where the culture actually became the community. This is where the band stopped being a musical act and started becoming a sovereign nation. By the time I hit my first show, the Deadhead was already a fully formed thing. We had tie-dye, Birkenstocks, and our own language, but that identity didn't just appear overnight. It was forged right here in the back half of the 70s. This is the era of the great tape explosion, the return of Mickey Hart in the year 1977, that people still rave about over social media like it's a religious text. So let's talk about what happened when the bus stopped, the fans got louder, and the music turned into a myth. Grab your bounce tube, crack a window, let's get into it. We start in 1975, which is a weird place to start a story about a band because the band technically wasn't touring. After those 1974 Winterland shows, the Dead went on hiatus. They were burnt out, broke, and probably tired of looking at each other's faces across a mountain of speakers. Now, usually when a band stops touring, the fans find something else to do. They buy a Pinto or start listening to disco. Not Deadheads. In 1975, the bus was still rolling, even if the band wasn't on it. This is the year that tape trading went from a niche hobby to the bedrock of the entire culture. If you weren't there, or if you're a younger head who grew up with every show available on your phone in 3 clicks, it's hard to explain the social network of tape trading. It was the internet before the internet, but it moved at the speed of the U.S. Postal Service. You'd meet a guy at a show, exchange addresses, and 3 weeks later, a padded envelope would arrive with a tape. In my time, it was the Maxell XL290, and don't lose those points. On those tapes was a treasure. A fuzzy recording of a show from 71 with a handwritten set list and illustrations to go with it. Because the band wasn't playing in 1975, the fans spent that time obsessing over what had already happened. They were building the mythology. By the time the band popped their heads out to record Blues for Allah, the fans were more organized than they'd ever been. And they were ready. But when the band finally returned to the stage in 1976, they didn't go back to the stadiums or the Wall of Sound. They went small. They played theaters, intimate rooms like the Orpheum in San Francisco or the Capitol Theater in Passaic. This created a total frenzy. If you think getting tickets on a modern app is stressful, imagine trying to find a ticket for a 2,000-seat theater when 50,000 people went in. This is where the ticket chase became a sport. It's where the finger in the air, the I Need a Miracle, really started to become a permanent fixture of the landscape. Musically, 1976 was a reset. Mickey Hart was back full-time, and suddenly the Rhythm Devils were reborn. The sound was tighter, a bit more structured, but still deeply experimental. They were playing these long, flowing segments like Help on the Way and Slipknot and Franklin's Tower. It was sophisticated. It was the Dead saying, "We're back, and we're a little wiser." This is also the era when the touring lifestyle started to solidify. People weren't just seeing the local show anymore. They were quitting their jobs at the hardware store to follow the band for 2 weeks. The parking lot was becoming a village. You started seeing the same faces, the same vans. It was no longer just a concert. It became a reunion. High school, veggie burritos.
For years, you've built an empire. One grilled cheese, one beer, one four-fingered lid at a time. But have you stopped to ask yourself, is my parking lot hustle working for me? Introducing Lot Wealth Management, Financial planning specifically designed for the modern shakedown entrepreneur.
So, based on your income streams, you've listed here $8,000 selling burritos, $4,000 from stickers, and you purchased 19 tickets to the Sphere.
They were tax deductible, man.
They absolutely were not.
At Lot Wealth Management, our trained specialists help you prepare for the future while still living extremely questionably in the present. We specialize in retirement planning for hair wrappers, 401k rollovers for former nitrous entrepreneurs, and helping touring vendors finally understand what an LLC actually is. Because someday, tour ends, and when it does, you'll want more than a storage unit full of hemp necklaces and expired falafel. Lot Wealth Management, turning parking lot cash into parking lot class.
And then we hit 1977. Every Deadhead has a 77 take. It's the law. If you're at a party and you want to start a fight, just say, "The Dead in 77 is overrated." No, don't actually do that. You'll be there for hours. May of 77, though, is widely considered the peak of the mountain. Specifically, May 8th at Barton Hall, Cornell University. That show is so famous that people have literally written books about it. The morning dew from that night is often cited as the pinnacle of Jerry Garcia's existence. What's interesting about 77 from a fan's perspective is how the myth of the year grew because of the tapes, because the recordings were so clean. Betty Cantor Jackson was doing some incredible work at the soundboard. These shows sounded like studio albums. When those tapes started circulating, it changed the standard. Suddenly, every fan had a reference for what a perfect show sounded like. By 1978, the band was a juggernaut. But with that came the wear and tear again. This is a year of incredible highs and some, what were you thinking, lows. The big story, of course, was the trip to Egypt. They played at the base of the Great Sphinx. It was the ultimate Dead move. Fly 3 planes worth of equipment and people to the desert to play music for the ghosts of pharaohs. Musically, it was okay. Culturally, it was legendary. It cemented the idea that the Grateful Dead would go anywhere and do anything for the sake of the vibe. Back home, the sound was getting big. Jerry's guitar tone was thickening up and the band was leaning into these massive bluesy rockers. But you also had the Donna debate. And boy, do fans have opinions on Donna. By the time I got on the bus in the 90s, the Donna scream was already a meme before memes existed. You'd be listening to a beautiful 78 playing in the band and suddenly Donna would let out a wail and half the room would cringe while the other half cheered. To me, that's the beauty of this era. It wasn't perfect. It was human. It was messy. It was exactly what it needed to be. And then we move into 1979 and the vibe changes. It's a pivot point. Keith and Donna Jean leave the band in February, and in April we get Brent Midland on keys. Brent changed everything. He brought this growly, soulful voice and a B3 organ that dragged the Dead out of the 70s and toward the 80s. The energy got more aggressive. The jams got darker. If 77 was a watercolor painting, 79 was an oil painting done in neon. For the fans, 79 felt like the end of the small era. The scene was getting bigger. The lot was already becoming a destination for people who weren't even sure who the band was. They just heard there was a party. Shakedown Street, the actual vending area, started to take a more permanent shape. People were realizing they could fund their tour by selling grilled cheese or t-shirts or drugs. It was the birth of the professional Deadhead. It wasn't just a weekend hobby anymore. It was a career path. You could see 80 shows a year if you were crafty enough. The dedication is what kept the band alive when the mainstream media ignored them. When I think about the years between 75 and 79, I see a band and a fan base that finally realized they didn't need the rest of the world. They had their own tapes, their own economy, their own language. They had survived the hiatus, conquered the pyramids, and found a new heart in Brent Midland. They were no longer a San Francisco band. They were a traveling circus that carried its own atmosphere with it wherever it went. Next time, We're heading into the 1980s. The year's 1980 to 1984. It's the era of acoustic sets at Radio City, the space segment becoming its own beast, and the band navigating a world that had become increasingly obsessed with synthesizers and hairspray. We'll talk about how the Dead stayed weird in the decade of greed. Thanks for hanging with me today on Tales from the Lot. I'm Will, reminding you to always cut the encore from your tape before cutting any of Drums in Space. That encore will fit fine at the end of the first set tape, with room to spare. Stay kind, friends. See you next time. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider hitting the subscribe button and leaving a comment. Your feedback and engagement really goes a long way to supporting and growing the show. And really, this is your show with your stories. So if you have a story, or even a few of them from seeing Grateful Dead shows or experiences of how the band has impacted your life in some way, I'd love to hear from you and have you on. My email is will@talesfromthelot.org. Reach out. Or you could use the new Text Me feature that's in the show notes. You can easily reach out and connect with me directly that way. And don't forget to follow on Facebook for updates and exclusive content. And for those who prefer watching, full videos of every episode are available on my YouTube channel. So thanks again, and please be kind to yourself and others.